Back in August 2020, I started making this Regency style dress for a set of small Regency LARPs called Scandal in Society. Unfortunately, due to COVID, the first event was moved to the same date as a friend's wedding, so I actually got quite a long way through making this dress, took a big break, and then somewhere around early 2021 I took it back up and finished making the dress in time for the second event. The game did end up getting indefinitely paused while we waited for COVID to settle down. We might be getting back into it, there has been some talk, but it does mean that since shooting this footage and actually editing it now, I haven't really done very much more than what I initially set out to do. I do have some other parts of this that I'd like to do, and I've got a few tweaks that I'll talk about at the end of the video that ideally I'd like to kind of do to the dress to make it sit a bit better and just be a little bit more easy to wear. However, this is what I have now, and even though I might change some elements in the future, I don't think I need to wait until that actually happens to make this video. The pattern I decided to use was a Butterick one, as that's what was in my local spotlight when I went to look. I got a white fabric for lining and a patterned off-white with green leaves for the dress itself. This is when I find out that I don't have enough fabric. Let's see. Let's do it. It's genuinely been about 10 years since I've last followed a paper pattern. So, this is going to be interesting stuff. I forgot the pattern's supposed to be medium. I folded the material in half, paying extra attention to both keeping the pattern lined up and also making sure that the bumps are flattened out. Why are they cutting two? Maybe they're not. Maybe I'm just confused. After a moment of confusion about how I was supposed to cut the pattern, I decided to unfold the fabric and flatten it out again. Okay, I really should iron this, but no. Sometimes consulting with a friend can help. I need to read this because I don't know what I'm doing. Eventually I figured it out and refolded the fabric. Right, so this is either really smart or really dumb. But I don't actually want to keep my pattern stuck to one particular size. So, do my best to cut down a straight line. Once I made the first cut, I was committed and followed through with the lining. Since this was my first time following a pattern in 10 years, I did try to keep it as organised as possible. You may notice the bottom of my oven, and that's because the kitchen was the one place in that house that had a large enough floor space that was suitable for cutting fabric. Not so handy when I'm cutting white, because you'd better hope there are no sneaky splashes of tomato sauce just lying on the floor anywhere. After all that kerfuffle, I wanted to play it extra safe with measuring and tacking down the seam line before sewing. The machine sewing itself was straightforward for the skirt part of the dress, all big long seams, and I just needed to sew them straight. That just went on, and on, and on. I did the same for the lining, but you get the picture. Once I had both the lining and the outer for the skirt, I pinned them together, but in blur, because the important thing here is my floor. I cut the back of the skirt so I could fit into it, and was in the process of tacking down some thread to turn into gathering when I got called away for a very important task.
You go out and do your stuff outside.
You want me to do my sewing outside?
No.
My gardening?
Yeah.
Oh yeah?
This time I'm ready to help you.
You're ready to help. That's fantastic to hear.
With my backup shovel.
When I got back to sewing, it was the evening and I had a helper. Unfortunately, he found my sewing attempts a bit annoying and we settled into an uneasy truce. With the skirt more or less ready for the bodice to be attached, I turned my efforts towards that. It was altogether harder, given the sheer number of gathers and pleats required. I didn't end up filming a whole lot of the creation process for the bodice, and that's because that was back when I thought the deadline for completion was relatively soon. I did find it was a bit big for me, so I brought in the front a bit and attached the back ribbon in such a way that the back part would bunch up rather than hang loose. It's something to watch out for the next time I make something from a pattern. I did manage to break a needle on a pin, which wasn't ideal, but it was a good reminder to always be a little bit careful with my sewing machine. Luckily, I have spare needles and I was back up and running again in no time. After a whole bunch more sewing, I finally got the skirt and bodice attached and covered most of the seams with ribbons. The back opening did end up going deeper than I realised, and that was a problem with the original plan to close the back with ribbons. I wore a white skirt underneath on the day, and that prevented any indecency. Here it is done. I might put a zip down the back at the bottom. While not entirely accurate, it will allow me to take off my shawl without feeling like I need to be careful with how loose the ribbons are. If I were to make this again, I guess it would be a good idea to do the smart thing and make a mock-up of the pattern before committing to cutting out the real pieces. That way, issues like the bodice being too big and the cut at the back too low would be relatively easy to sort out in advance. I am planning to make some form of coat to go with the dress as well, and while I'm doing that I might make a second dress, because the way that the LARP is formatted is that there's usually a morning and an evening event, so actually having two dresses would be quite a good idea. That's it for now. Maybe next time the footage will be more than a year or two old. Bye.